Hi, this is Michelle Ockers. On the 31st of August 2016, I had the very good fortune of moderating a discussion on leadership. The event was put on by PSK Events, and this particular panel or Fishbowl discussion was held in Sydney. Trent Rosen from PSK had managed to pull together an outstanding set of panellists for the discussion who I'll introduce in a moment. You'll notice in a moment that the video footage switches from landscape to portrait. That's because a couple of days after the actual event, I sat down and did a reflection using Snapchat on the key themes that had come up during the panel discussion. And I've decided just to share that raw footage rather than to remake the video because I'd only be saying the same things. Really interested to see what people who view the video think of the Snapchat footage. First panellist is Nigel Paine, who at one stage was the head of learning and development with the BBC and now does a lot of work with coaching, consulting, speaking and writing. Second panellist was Commodore Goddard, who commands surface force for the Royal Australian Navy in Sydney, 18 warships, 3,500 people. The final panellist is Cameron Clyne, who is the chair of the Australian Rugby Union and an ex-CEO of the National Australia Bank. It was a little bit disappointing that there were no women on the panel, no female leaders. However, there was a really amazing diversity and depth of experience. Before I talk about the themes, one of the things I was really impressed with was just how down to earth all three of the panellists were. The format was something called a fishbowl. So I sat at the front with the three panellists, and then there was this empty hot seat at the end of the panellists' row. The participants were in rows, sort of curved rows facing the panellists, and if someone wanted to join the discussion from the participants group, they could come and sit in the hot seat. So although I did the intros and had a set of questions, a lot of the key to the success of this format is to get people coming up and asking their own questions and encouraging that. And we had a good flow of conversation, good range of questions asked. So I'm just going to run through some of the key themes that came up. Resilience came up really quickly. A leader cannot have an off day, basically, and behaviour under stress is the key to good leadership. A key part of building leadership in the view of the panel is self-awareness. You've got to know yourself. The organisation has to understand itself as well in order to build leadership. Visibility came out as a theme, particularly from Cameron Clyne, and especially in regard to his experience at the National Australia Bank where he was CEO. For Cameron, it's all about information flow being critical and the fact you want people to be able to tell you things, so you need to strip away the hierarchy. The dual idea of accountability and support came out from Nigel Paine. So you've got to support people and give them time, but you've also got to hold them accountable. And on the time theme, we talked a lot about behavioural change and forming habits and the fact that developing leadership takes time. You've got to give people time from the time you start. So there's no quick fix. You can't just send people on a workshop for 2 days, a week, 2 weeks and expect they come back and they're leaders. They need lots of time to develop their leadership. Two other things required to develop leadership are to role model it yourself and also to set standards. You get the behaviour you walk by. You've also got to be seen as a leader. People expect you to act the part at the same time as being approachable. You've got to conduct yourself as a leader. And Cameron Clyne talked about the fact you can't have a bad day as a leader. You have to be resilient. You have to be able to manage yourself. And this links into the self-awareness so that people see you. Cameron also told a story about him being coached when he first became CEO at National Australia Bank at the age of 40. And his coach basically saying to him, you've got to promote yourself. And speaking of coaching, to develop those working with you, don't solve their problems when they come to you. Ask them great questions and coach them through it. Get them to solve their own. There was one question about trust for leaders and particularly developing trust in the online world. I thought that Commodore Goddard's answer was the best of the panellists, and he talked about the fact that the military is always at the forefront of technology and this online world is no different. He made the point that people are behind the virtual world, that the virtual world consists of people, and that in effect virtual has made communication and leadership more personal. There are a few specific questions about topics that came up, three of them that I'll run through briefly. So the old chestnut around middle management, and are they the iron kernels of permafrost and you can't get change to flow down beyond that middle management layer. Cameron Clyne made a great point in that they're not homogenous. It's not one group and you need multiple approaches for different kinds of middle managers and you need to understand the individual. And there was a great quote from Goddard about co-creation: do leadership with people, not to people. This question, which I actually asked, was, is L&D relevant to leadership development? I asked this question because at this point in the discussion there'd been lots of talk around how a leader can develop other people as leaders and also develop themselves, but no talk about L&D. So it was a clear yes for the military, who invest lots in formal leadership development every year, but some question marks from the other two panellists. Nigel Paine said that it's up to L&D to be relevant, and this kind of matched what Cameron Clyne said, in that they're relevant where they're integral and aligned with the organisation. Cameron Clyne got a little bit of a laugh that was quite sad when he said he's been in organisations where he's looked at L&D and wondered if they were actually part of the same organisation. Last question, how is sports relevant to business? Three very different responses. One, a specific story about a lesson learned from sport. Another about the importance of sport to wellbeing and using it to get to know your people. And final response about the fact that skill alone is not good enough. There has to be a psychology, a mindset around success for both sports and business. So thank you to Trent Rosen from PSK Events for entrusting me to moderate that Fishbowl discussion. It was a great experience, both in terms of that format and the nature of the conversation that it generated, and in terms of being able to meet those three panellists and tap into their experience and expertise. The only regret I have is that it wasn't a lot longer, because there was so many more topics we could have delved into, or so much deeper we could have gone with some of the questions and themes that were raised. If you'd like to comment, please leave a comment down below, or you can get in touch with myself and Trent to continue the discussion on either Twitter or LinkedIn, and I'll put our contact details on the final slide.